Hello, YouTube. The search for legacy of a highly developed northern civilization called Hyperborea has continued in the 21st century. Hundreds of enthusiasts or aficionados visit the northern regions of Russia to discover traces of prehistoric mankind. At least they did before the Russian-Ukrainian war. I'm not sure about the present. There are researchers who calculated that over the billions of years the Earth has existed, dozens of highly developed civilizations could have formed on it. Therefore, there is no doubt to some Russian researchers that you and I are not the only first intelligent human species on this planet. Yes, traces of the most ancient humanity can be found in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. But such researchers who have traveled in Russia or throughout Russia stated that they have a huge amount of evidence of a once powerful civilization. And I've presented my evidence in my videos about hypothetical ancient advanced civilizations in the territory known as Russia today, but I would point to Eurasia. Today, let's look into the ancient world of the Kola Peninsula. It is here that you can fully immerse yourself in the many thousands of years of history. And I've presented a few videos about the Kola Peninsula. Today, I want to tell you a little bit more, but let me describe, for those who do not know, the Kola Peninsula, in Russian, Kolsky Poloostrov, and in the Sami language, it would be Kola, is a peninsula in the extreme northwest of Russia, and one of the largest peninsulas of Europe. It's constituting the bulk of the territory of the Murmansk region in northern Russia. It lies almost completely inside the Arctic Circle, and it is bordered by the Barents Sea to the north and by the White Sea to the east and southeast. The city of Murmansk, the most populous settlement on the peninsula, has a population of about 300,000 residents. Here's what the official history tells us. While humans had already settled in the north of the peninsula in the 7th to 5th millennium BC, the rest of its territory remained uninhabited until the 3rd millennium BC, when various peoples started to arrive from the south. By the 1st millennium CE or AD, only the Sami people remained. This changed in the 12th century when the Russian Pomors, people who live and explore the northern areas of Russia historically, discovered the peninsula's rich resources of game and fish. Soon after, the Pomors were followed by the tribute collectors from the Novgorod Republic, and the peninsula gradually became a part of the Novgorodian lands. The Novgorodians, however, established no permanent settlements until the 15th century. The Soviet period, that would be from 1917 to 1991, saw a rapid population increase, although most of the new arrivals remained confined to urbanized territories along the seacoast and the railroads. The Sami people were subject to forced collectivization, including forced relocation to Lov Ozero and other centralized settlements. And overall, the peninsula became heavily industrialized and militarized. This is the traits of Soviet socialism, largely due to its strategic position and the preeminent Soviet ice-free Atlantic coast and the discovery of the vast apatite deposits in the 1920s. As a result, the ecology of the peninsula suffered major ecological damage. After the 1991 dissolution of the Soviet Union, the economy went into steep decline and the population fell from 1,150,000 in 1989 to just 795,000 in 2010. The peninsula somewhat recovered in the early 21st century, and it is considered the most industrially developed and urbanized region in the northern Russia. Well, Let's get to the paranormal now. Participants of many expeditions who have visited the peninsula point to a large number of megalithic structures destroyed both from time and from some kind of impact. Academic science, of course, denies the man-made nature of these megalithic complexes. But you see, what those enthusiasts and researchers see with their own eyes states quite the opposite. Several pyramids have been discovered on the Kola Peninsula. They're built according to a different method than the Egyptian ones. The base consists of 4 monolithic slabs, weighing about 10,000 tons. The next level consists of smaller slabs, and thus a pyramidical structure is obtained. There's no doubt that such a building cannot be a product of nature. And the most interesting thing is that the very fact of the existence of a whole complex of building structures older than 80,000 years is hidden. Not far from the pyramid is the so-called ladder of the northern gods in the circle. That's how the researchers call it. This artifact really represents a staircase consisting of 16 steps leading to a large stone. Let me describe it better for you. Similar in shape to a throne. The problem is that each of the steps has a height of 1.4 meters. That is, it's impossible for a human being of ordinary size to walk along it. The throne is also of an unusual size. Perhaps it would be comfortable for somebody who is 3 to 4 meters tall. In addition to such colossal stairs, there are quite a lot suitable ones, the ones that are suitable for the height of the ordinary people. The most interesting are the ancient pools. These are huge balls hollowed out in granite with angles at 90 degrees. The water, once inside, stayed there for a long time, since the climate in these parts has never been hot. Among other things, a huge number of giant granite blocks are scattered throughout the Kola Peninsula. Some of them are perfectly smooth, which indicates the level of processing of the material. There are also traces of the use of mechanical action. If all these small proofs or evidence are put together, then a whole picture is obtained. You see, it looks like this. In ancient times, a state was located here, and the buildings there were erected from granite. The estimated age of the heyday of this civilization is 80 to 90,000 years. What is on the surface today is about only 5 to 10% of the entire array of structures that had existed on the territory of the Kola Peninsula. According to various researchers who have visited the area, 95% of the finds are hidden under a multi-meter layer of dirt and earth, overgrown with mosses and lichens. Vitaly Sundakov is a famous Russian traveler, journalist, author of many articles and books about travel, photographer, expert on survival and comprehensive security. He's into martial arts too. He is an expert, so to say, in ancient civilizations in extreme climatic zones. In 1978, Vitaly Vladimirovich Sundakov began to travel. For 40 years, he has made more than 35 expeditions, visiting more than 2,000 countries. So Vitaly Sundakov stated that in order to complete the picture and restore the heritage of the ancient civilization of the Kola Peninsula, huge investments and special equipment are needed. The complex is actually hidden from the eyes of the scientists under a multi-meter layer of deposited rocks. For thousands of years, the landscape of the area has repeatedly changed after the country or state emptied out, so to say. And as a result, Now, many of the ancient buildings have lost their original appearance. By the way, Nazi Germany was very much interested in getting their hands or paws on the Kola Peninsula, but they lost. I mean, they had Nazi sabotage agents parachuted into the peninsula. They had bases there. The bloody Annenerbe organization was active, trying to get into the peninsula. They were looking for something. They knew the worth in historical terms of this land. We may not know everything they knew, or we may not be told, but this was definitely of interest to them. Here are some comments of Russians about the peninsula. For example, at one time, a person named Marat, he often visited the northern regions of Russia and met many interesting people who, by virtue of their professions, studied or often visited the northern latitudes. He remembers very well the story of a naval officer who started serving on warships at a very young age during the World War II. Marat heard his story in 2002, and he said, that there was a special order from Stalin, instructions, that many geographical areas, and especially Novaya Zemlya, should be protected and preserved for the future. The significance, by the way, of the Novaya Zemlya you can find in my videos and what's going on there about USOs and UFOs and so forth. Anyway, Marat said that according to the stories, as that Russian military officer told him, there were such megaliths and pyramids on Novaya Zemlya that the Egyptian ones could not be even compared to them, because everything was so large scale. But with the arrival of Khrushchev, everything changed dramatically, and a landfill was set up there when the officer was there last in 1985, and he did not see the traces of the greatness that was there. But the officer did not rule out that there may be underground structures that can still shed light on many things. Here's an interesting observation from the Russian woman Tatiana. Her husband served in the military in the Kola Peninsula, and he said that there is a rubble stone that no drill can go through. Even diamond tips fly off. And a Russian by the name of Alexei has said this. This is a very strong point of view, but we need to listen to him as well. By the way, the Nazis could have been hunting for what is hidden there during the Great Patriotic War, referring to World War II. And the fact that the Russian North may be much more interesting than other places on the planet for Russian scientists is no longer a theory, but a fact, and it must be taken for granted. And the Kola Peninsula itself is no ordinary in every sense. If there is a large-scale excavation, then much more will be found. And the whole zone, which is on the same parallel as the rest of the Russian North. Actually, this is one of the most important territories of his country, said Alexei, which does not give rest to the West, and therefore they want to grip away or take over the Northern Sea route and the islands located in the Arctic Ocean from the Russians. In general, money should be invested not in the exploration of outer space and alien worlds, but in the study of the Russian land and the planet as a whole. And here's another statement by a person named Maxim, who lives in the peninsula. And here is what Maxim stated. We have places where it's better not to stick your nose in. An expedition was discovered. Their faces were distorted with horror. Everyone was dead. Maxim does not remember what year it was. And he continued that usually there is a warning. The feeling that you are about to be skinned. He, Maxim, even had an encounter with someone. There was a moment. Maxim describes the creature as follows. It was little, 1 meter 40 in size, 3 eyes, silver cloth. The head passed immediately into the shoulders. No mouth, no nose. Well, that's his testimony, but there is much more I want to tell you now about the Kola Peninsula. This fascinating lore and legends come from the research of Vladislav Valentinovich Vasiliev, who graduated from the physics department of the Leningrad State University. And until the year 2000, he worked at the Research Institute of the Exploration Geophysics, St. Petersburg. Since January 2000, a leading geophysicist of the Arctic Marine Exploration Expedition. And Ekaterina Georgievna Vasilyeva. She graduated from the Faculty of Mathematics and Mechanics of the Leningrad State University, and she is the leading programmer of the Arctic Marine Exploration Expedition. The Kola Peninsula has some inexplicable magical power. It is felt in everything, in mountains, rivers, lakes, forests, and seas. This witchcraft is in local fairy tales and legends. It is also in the people inhabiting the Murmansk region. The underground life of the Kola Peninsula is very diverse. So in the rocks near Yokaganga live Paktiyelia, the inhabitants of the rocks. The master of the rocks is called Pakthazen, the owner, and his wife is Paktiement, and the daughter is Paktielianita. They are usually invisible, but one Saami he not only saw them, but allegedly he even took Paktielianita as his wife. The spirits of the Saids also live inside the stones, but they still cannot be called underground inhabitants, since the Saids are entirely on the surface of the earth. The spirit of Mother Earth lives underground, which sometimes comes to the surface in the form of a woman, Ahlopinka. We should also name the goddess of the earth with her beautiful and intelligent daughter, Palaskasvu. And the devil lives in the deep cave with his old woman and 3 beautiful daughters. Sometimes it is possible to see tsakalachaks, the small earthen men, but nothing good can be expected from this. They can offer to marry a terrible dwarf whose face is in the color of the earth, and the nose seems to have grown into the ground, all warts and bumps, and her stomach is sagging, her eyes are small, cold, her eyebrows hanging rags, and there is no hair at all. The habitat is between the summer Yokaganga and Saviha. Most likely, these chakalachaks are just one of those most curious creatures which should be discussed in more details. Chakli, chachlins, chaklins, chaklins, and chaklings all are the names of the same fairy folk or people inhabiting the dungeons, or I should say the bowels of the Kola Peninsula. These are such small naked creatures, smaller than a 1-year-old child. They lived underground and managed the wealth located underground. They had the same small deer and dwarf birch trees. According to some sources, they liked to mimic and tickle people, and according to others, they were the kindest creatures, only very touchy if they were deceived. That's why it turned out that there were a lot of cheaters, but only dwarf birches remain in memory of this underground or small folk, small people. Although who knows? The Vasilyevs managed to trace the encounter places with these creatures. Judging by the fairy tales, you can encounter them all over the Kola Peninsula, both in the Khibini and on the coast of the Barents Sea. But most often they appear or appeared in the valley of the Tuloma River. More precisely, its right source is the Nota River. The left one is called Lota. Excuse me, where Nota and Lota joined, there used to be Lake Natozero, and apparently the village of Natozero stood there. Now, all these places have gone to the bottom of the Verkhny Tulomsky Reservoir, which flooded the valley for more than 30 meters. Here's what I want to add. Look at my videos about Yakutia in Russia. The same happened to the site of the radioactive cauldrons. They are at the bottom of the reservoir in that area. But people know the location. It's just getting to them is almost impossible. Anyway, back to the peninsula. Somewhere on the Tulom, there was a Ristikan churchyard, also underwater now. And above the Nat Ozero was the village of Nivenkulya. This village, or what is left of it, is called Nivankul. Its coordinates are 68 degrees, 21 minutes north latitude, 30 degrees, 44 minutes east longitude. There's a weather station there. And if I'm not mistaken, there is also there's a water measuring point. And there's also, by the way, there's tourist accommodation there, but I'm not sure how many tourists would go there now. And there is a mountain to the west of the village, 68 degrees, 22 minutes north latitude, 30 degrees, 40 minutes east longitude. Who knows? Maybe this is Chachli Pakhta from the fairy tale Chachli of the writing collection of E. Patsia. In some books, the elevation of the Chesklivid is also mentioned, the hill of small underground people. In the interfluvi of Tuloma and Kola, I'm speaking about interfluvi is narrow, elongated, and plateau-like or ridge-like land form between two valleys. More generally, an interfluvi is defined as an area of higher ground between two rivers in the same drainage system. I just wanted to make sure you know what I'm talking about. Vasiliev did not manage to see it, that hill, even at a half a kilometer distance. Great disguise these gnomes were capable of, he said. They often frolic on sandy shores, dive underground, from underground to the surface, and then back underground again. Their fussiness among the Notozersk Sami is proverbial. A fussy person is sometimes asked an ironic question: why are you diving like a chachli? According to Sami fairy tales compiled by Patsia. One day an old man was walking through the forest and suddenly noticed that smoke was coming between the roots of an old spruce. He came closer and looked, a hole in the ground. He lay down on the moss and lowered his head into the hole. What is there? What is being done there? And he sees. There under the ground, life is the same as ours, meaning the Sami. There are churchyards, some in the forest, others by the sea. Shepherds graze deer, fishermen catch fish. In the churchyards, the veja, or huts made of hewn boards, are the same like on the surface. They are covered with birch bark and turf on the top. They stand as they should in two rows. People come in and out of the veja, and kids, they run around the streets. There's a woman who jumped out one of the veja and runs to her home. A burner is smoking in her hands. Sparks are falling. This is a woman who borrowed fire from a neighbor. She needs to light a fire in the hearth of her house. Some peasant is teaching his deer to carry a sled. It is called kerija, and is the same like the Samis, like a boat put on a skid. And there, further away, a shepherd is driving a herd of deer. In the river, girls are rinsing their clothes. Everything is there underground, like people, but they are not people. A little man came out of the crowd, a gun on his shoulder, a little dog on a string running from behind, a flintlock gun, an old one. It is called a grimyacha, or rattle. He is the one who went hunting, only he himself is very small, and his dog is even smaller, and his house is tiny. This is according to Sami fairy tales, edited by Charnalutsky. This is only part of what the Vasilyevs managed to find out. The Sami did not like Chachli very much, even if they took them to live with the Sami. After a while, they tried to get rid of them. One of the ways was this. The Sami took a knife and began to drive the blunt side down his throat. Now the Chachli, imitating the owner or the host, did the same, but with the sharp edge. They also caught the Chachli either with fishing nets or with specially used obors. Kangas are summer Sami shoes made of deerskin with fur outside and with sharp upturned noses. The obor is a leg wrap, something like a foot cloth. In the fairy tale The Naked Man from the collection of Patsia, the protagonist is no longer a dwarf. He lives on the Chakshevarak near the Vanozir lake. This suggests that part of the Chachli were actually human-sized. And remember what Maxim said, but I don't think he was referring to Chachli. Here's what is interesting. This man from the fairy tale was both rich and a bit of a wizard. He was able to predict or conjure the impoverishment of the relatives of a greedy hunter. But Vasilyev would really like to draw a parallel with another underground character. Listen to this, to Santa Claus. Why underground? It turns out that this great storyteller, as Vasilyev calls him, spends most of the year, all summer, in a cave. And that cave is located, according to sources from Finland, in the Korvantunturi mountain near the border with Russia. His wife, Old Mori, lives there. His deer graze there, the most beloved of which is Rudolph the Red-Nosed. And who knows how to light up the road with his nose in the dark forest? Vasilyev managed to find this mountain on the map. As it turned out, it is not located near the border with Russia, but exactly on the border. And this makes it possible to classify the Santa Claus, I guess, and his wife as the inhabitants of the Kola Peninsula. The geographical coordinates of this mountains are 68 degrees 05 minutes north latitude, 29 degrees 20 minutes east longitude. By the way, this is also in the Nota River basin. It would be interesting to find out where the last characters came from. Vasilyev assumes that both Santa Claus and the Chachlis are descendants of the ancient Sami. In confirmation, Vasilyev can refer to the Sami legends about the three Nagons, invasions of enemies, as a result of which the Sami were forced to hide underground. And there is interesting reference to the book by Charnalutsky titled Land of the Flying Stone. Perhaps some of them remained there after the enemies left. Most of the underground Sami were crushed, but nevertheless, from time to time they appeared and stunted of normal growth. Further, if you read the legends more carefully, you can notice the lag in development effect of the Chachli from the Sami. Everywhere the former imitates and the latter teach. Apparently, the lack of chakli clothing is explained by the fact that the ancient Sami, they had the bare minimum. But please note, the recorded fairy tales date from the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. Over the past 100 years or more, especially after the fourth catch-up, meaning the World War II, Russian dwarfs have made significant progress in development. That's why we don't see the naked Santa Claus and his gnomes anymore. They're adopted clothes from modern people. But actually the clothes are not modern, but from the 18th century. If you look at the Sami outfit from the book of the academician ethnographer Georgi, then you will see that the triangular cap with a pom-pom, pointed shoes, kangas, and a white doublet, so similar to us from the stories about the New Year, or well, in Russia that's the main holiday, but let's point out to other holidays where Santa Claus appears, like Christmas, and here is the prototype of Santa Claus. One day the Sami came to the seashore on their sleds. They wanted to cross the Salma to the island and hunt animals there. On the shore they had a veja and there was a karbas or a boat. They untied the deer from the and let them graze, and they crossed the Salma to the island on the boat. They tied the karbas at the shore and walked around the island. They went hunting. The eldest of them was a sorcerer dreamer. He saw in a dream that something was wrong. Have the chucklings untied our karbas? He asked his comrades. Let's go to the shore. They came to the shore and they see, in fact, there is no karbas. Says the elder then, lie down on the shore with your head to the sea and lie still, be silent. The Sami lay quietly, calm. Whether they slept long or short, they don't know. Suddenly they felt as if the earth was shaking or the sea was agitated. The noise ascended as if a lot of fish were beating their tails on the water. And they look and they see a huge school of saida or pollock fish, like a raft located under them. Then it seemed to them that they had fallen into the water. They look and they're already at the shore. It was the saida fish who brought them to the mainland. So the Sami came ashore. They came to Veja to dry off. They lit a fire, boiled water in the cauldron. Suddenly someone knocked on the door of the Veja. This is a chuckling who came to us, said the elder. You sit still, let him come in, and I'll pour boiling water over him. The door was opened. The chuckling began to enter the Veja, naked like all the chucklings. And the elder at that time splashed boiling water onto him. So he splashed and shouted, I burned myself. Chuckling also shouted and ran away. The Sami began to fear that the chuckling would not return to them. They were going to leave quickly. They harnessed reindeer and went into the tundra. At that time, there was a frost and a blizzard. The Sami were driving, and suddenly they hear through the blizzard. The chucklings are running after them. So the Sami began to drive deer as much as they could. The chucklings ran after them, but never caught up and fell behind. And since the chucklings were naked, they froze in the tundra. This was told back in 1936, actually recorded and translated by Akimov in the Voroninsky churchyard, and a Sami named Dmitriev told him this story. No one knows what were the Chakli and when they lived in the world. Well, if there were such people, it was so long ago that even fairy tales began to forget about them. They said that there was no one kinder than the Chakli in the whole world. They lived underground and owned all of the riches of the bowels of the earth, but they lived modestly. They didn't even have any clothes. They were small in stature, smaller than a 1-year-old child, and their deer were small. In memory of them, dwarf birches remained on earth, and they were grown also such birches by Chakli, it reportedly in the underground forests. It happened, however, that one of the Sami offended the Chakli, cheated and made a lot of wealth with their help. When they guessed that they had been dragged into this evil, not a good thing, they took offense and left those places forever, the Chakli did. Maybe that's why they don't exist in that land anymore, because people began to be very greedy. Before, to say Sami meant honesty. It used to happen that merchants would come to the churchyard, and the Sami would come to them with the summer crafts. The merchants would cover the goods so that the animals do not steal, and they know even if a year would go by, nothing will be stolen. It will just stand untouched. And it was not that relatively long ago. Sami children used to listen to fairy tales about the little naked man Chakli, who owned all the underground wealth and helped many people. That's how they tell about in one fairy tale. There was once a hunter who would drive around using skis in the winter. Suddenly he sees in the middle of winter, in a small disintegration of snow, there's absolutely no grass, no other way. He thought somebody who lives underground is responsible. He put his ear to the ground. He heard voices, laughter, and the deer are going crazy. Yes, they must have settled here. He would like to see them. The hunter got comfortable and he waited. Suddenly he feels that someone is looking at him. He turned around and there was a tiny naked man standing in front of him. The hunter froze, and the Chakli was so funny. Whatever the hunter did, the Chakli repeated everything after him. I wish I could bring him home, please the kids. How would I catch him? The hunter thought to himself. He was cunning. He unwound the obors of the kangas, short fur boots, and he put one of the abor, brightly colored one, close to Chakli, and he started to wrap himself with the other one. The Chakli looked at him, and then took the abor and started to wrap himself too. The Chakli always repeated what people were doing. They really wanted to learn everything from the human beings, to live in friendship with people. Well, he is all wrapped up now, confused and cannot move. The hunter took him, put in his bosom, and went home as soon as possible. The hunter brought Chakli to his veja, a dwelling covered with moss and turf, similar to a hut. The children were delighted. They were taught to speak with Chakli. They carried the creature on their hands. They played with him. Sami clothes were sewn for him. And Chakli also tried to repeat everything after the humans. And he learned to have the human wisdom, so to say. But then the trouble happened later. The Chud people attacked the churchyard, and the Chud were the enemy of the Sami. All the men grabbed their bows and began to fight with the raiders. And the Chakli went with the Sami. Now they began to persuade the Chakli to hide, and the Chakli did not obey. He saw the Chud and ran towards them. Well, they stabbed him with spears, beat him with clubs, but nothing happened to him. The Chud got scared, decided that the place was enchanted there, and quickly ran away. All the Sami people bowed down low to the Chakli. They thanked him for saving them from the Chud. And the hunter suddenly felt uneasy. He was ashamed that he deceived the Chakli. The hunter took him, put in his bosom, and went to that place where they met first. The Chakli was delighted when he saw his native place. The Sami lowered him to the ground. The Chakli thanked the hunter and asked to wait a little. So Sami was looking surprised. 1 second the Chakli was there and suddenly he was gone. A little time passed and the Chakli appeared, holding gold and silver ingots in his hands. He gave them to the hunter and said, "Let the Sami, when they have a need, come here. We will always give them as much as they need." So this is what I wanted to tell you today, to present the legends of the Kola Peninsula, the strategic land in the Russian north. You can see more of my videos about this peninsula and its many secrets, including the Soviet police expeditions there, about the strange structures and strange zombie-like trance local people experience, about the deep borehole to the bowels of the planet, and much more. And if you like my research, I please ask you that you support me. You'll find the description and the links to this video, and I'll bring you more interesting tales of the Eurasian paranormal. Thank you.